Alright, I want to go back and hit a topic that we covered earlier in the semester, which is file access. The idea behind this is what I want us to be able to do is a couple things. I'm just making notes here, but I created used idle to create a script here, which I could type. Read in the file line by line. To do that, we're going to use read lines. Read line with no S. Read the file in as a list of lines, which we're going to use read lines for. Read the entire file in as a string, single string, and then loop on the file to process it line by line. And what reminded me that I want to hit all these topics is I went back and I looked at another online text called How to Think Like a Computer Scientist Learning with Python 3. So I can post a link to that. You guys who took my 1113 class are already familiar with it. Then there's a couple more topics I want to hit. If I can find it on here. I'm not seeing it, but that's enough. Those are enough topics. Okay. So in order to get a file to process, I'm just going to open the one file that I know is here, which is this program file. We could specify any file that's in the same current directory, or we could write an entire path to it, but I think this is good enough. So I'm going to call this one November16.py, and when I create a file name variable, that's going to be what is in it. File name is equal to November16.py. Right, that way I know that file's there. Now I'm not going to open it for writing or appending or anything. Although we could make a self-writing program by appending to it. Nah.
So does .readline need parentheses since .readlines?
They all need parentheses. I am very sorry. .readline, .readlines, .read, and then just use a for loop. A for X in file loop to process it line by line. All right, let's open that file. F, that's a snazzy variable name, is equal to open, file name for reading. Then we're going to read it in line by line. Since my brain loves while true loops, I'm going to do that. While true, and I'm going to read it into a line of text. Text is equal to f dot readline. Then I'm going to trim it. Text is equal to text dot rtrim, except it's called strip, isn't it? rstrip. Text dot rstrip. Now I'm just going to check to see if we have any data at all. As a matter of fact, I should do that before I even continue any further. So I'm going to put this line above that one. If the length of what we just read is equal to 0, break. Get out of our loop. It means that we didn't read in any data. We're at the end of the file. Otherwise, we strip it of any carriage returns, and let's print it. I didn't mean to say test equals. Text equals text.rstrip. I just wanted to store it back in itself and then print that out. Then we can close that file. F.close. Let's make sure that works. We should get an output that looks like our program. And there it is. So that's how you can read it in line by line with readline. There's another way to read it in line by line, but that is certainly one way. We may as well do this second one right then and there for X in file. So we're going to open the file back up. So this one's going to use a for loop to process a line, but otherwise its functionality is just about identical. F is equal to open our file name again. For X in F, for every line of data in our file, text is equal to X. We don't even have to do that, but yeah, come to think of it, let's, instead of calling it for X in F, let's just check to see if it's zero length, which it won't be. We'll be able to remove this comment, this line of text, just fine. Otherwise, let's strip it. Text is equal to text.rstrip, and let's print it out. Then close our file. All right, why don't we need this? Because the for loop is going to take care of it for us. It's not going to give us an empty string devoid of even a carriage return at the end of it. And by the way, that's a quirk of Python text files, is if you have a line of text that doesn't end in a carriage return, it doesn't treat it as part of the file. So if you open up Notepad, you create a file and you type this in, this is a file, but you don't hit enter, then you close the file and then you try to read it, it's going to treat it like it's an empty file. But I'm going to delete those two lines, they're not necessary. You can see that this syntax is considerably more concise. We accomplished in effectively 5 lines of code what took considerably longer here. Not that much longer, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. Looks a lot cleaner. Let's make sure it works. Alright, it printed them all out. There's 1 and 2. Those are our 2 methods of doing it. Given the choice, I would do this. I don't see any advantage to using the read line method at all. Let's go ahead and put comments in as to which ones we are doing. This first one is read the file line by line with .readline. That's above the first one, above the 1 colon. The next one is read the file in line by line with a for X in file loop. Now let's do the one where we read the entire file in as a list. Read the entire file in with 1 call as a list. So again, F is equal to open do file name, comma read. And by the way, if you leave off the comma R, that's the default mode. So, but it's nice to remember, because if you change that to a W, you'd be overwriting your file. Just nice to see the syntax there. And if you put an A there, it means append to an existing file. Alrighty. What is our data? What's our list going to be called? Why not just data? Data is equal to f.readLines. funsies, we could prove that it's a list. You wouldn't do this in your real code, but print data subscript 0 is equal to, comma, data subscript 0. Print data subscript 1 is equal to, comma, data subscript 1. Let's make sure that works. Then we'll write a for loop to process the entire thing, a for x in list loop. Oh, I didn't close it yet. Things close as soon as the program is done running, so that's going to be good enough in this case. Alrighty, so when it ran, I'll bring the code back up. We see data 0 is equal to all that, and then it's got a blank line. Why? Because we didn't strip. We didn't strip the do the R strip, so it's still got a character turn line feed at the end. If you don't care, if all you're going to do is then stick this in another list by using split, then you don't care about that \n at the end of the file. So we have a list. I'm going to comment those two guys out. We've just proven that it's a list because we saw that we have elements 0 and 1. So for line in data, we could close the file right lickety split there. We've already read it all in at this point. So just call close as soon as we've read it in. No reason to keep it around. So I put that under our read lines. So for line in data, we could just do the same thing that we did every other time. Print it out. Maybe we're going to do something a little bit more interesting. We could split it up. Words in this line is equal to line dot split, right? And then let's print those words. Print 3 colon, comma, words. Just to be doing something different than just printing it out. Well, looky there. Sure is a lot of blank stuff. But my file really does have all those blank lines at the end of it, because I've been hitting return to push text up, so that's valid. If I wanted to, I could make an if statement, that if the list was at length 0, not to print anything out. That'd be fun. Let's do that. So, after we've split it, if the length of words is greater than 0, print it out. That just skips all the blank lines. And we could have done the same thing after we R stripped the data. If the length of it was 0, then that meant that there wasn't anything in it. It was an empty string. Alright, there. All the blank lines are removed. That's pretty. Okay. Have we done all 4 methods? No, we haven't read it into a single string. We can do that. Why would you want to do that? Well, we've written code that processed all the words out of a file or all the letters out of a file, or you're writing it because you haven't done it yet. Either way, you may just want to open it in and then you have one string with all of your data in it. Now there are some performance considerations to both this tactic and read lines. And those performance considerations are, if your file is like 2 megabytes of text, this is trying to read in 2 megabytes of text and create a list from it right then and there. So the memory requirements for your program are very large at that point. Whereas if you're processing it line by line, the memory requirements of your program are still very small, because you only have to have enough memory to hold one line in rather than 2 megabytes of data. The same is true of what we're about to do here. If we had a file that was 2 megabytes long and we read it in as an entire string, then now all of a sudden you have a string that contains that much memory. You can run Python out of memory by doing things like that. Alright, so read the entire file into a string with one dot read call. So guess what the first line is going to be? We got to open our file again. What are we going to do? Let's just reuse the same variable, but what am I going to type?
Equals open file here.
Yep, F is equal to open file name. We can put in the optional comma R. That's the default behavior. Now string. Guess I'm going to call it sData to differentiate it from data up here. Is equal to f.read. Now, if we issue a print, it's just going to print that entire thing, which is, about a kilobyte or two of programming now. Well, I don't know if we want to do that, but we could, let's print the length of the string. Print 4 colon length of string equals comma len sData. And again, we could close the file as soon as we've read it. So f.close above our print statement. Again, we could split it or something, right? So data is equal to s.split and then just print it out word by word for word in data colon if the length of the word is greater than 0. Let's print it out. Print 4 colon plus, or excuse me, comma, word. Just to show that we have something to do.
Make it sData.
I am so sorry, pardon?
sData.
Yes, you're correct. No, it doesn't. Yes. S.split is wrong. It should be sData.split. So correct that line. I had S.split. It's sData.split. Thank you. And I'm going to move this final print, the length of the string, down to the very bottom, just so that I won't have to scroll up and find the length of the string. And the length of the string should actually be pretty close equivalent to the length of the file itself, as measured in bytes. Alright, it's printing out all the words in it. Our program is now about, 1.1 kilobytes in length, which if we went and looked here, I'm sure we would find that to be the case. Well, this is saying 2 kilobytes. It must be rounding up. Whatever. Right click, properties. Can we get a more precise? Yeah, 1.2 kilobytes right there. All right, 4 ways to read the file. Which way you want to do it depends on what you want to do. If it's a short file, you want to process it all in one fell swoop, read it into one string. If you want to process it line by line, you could, you have several choices there. You could use read lines, which puts it into a list of lines, and then you just process on that list. Or you could use dot read line and read it in individually, line by line, rather than put those in a list. Or you could just use a for loop, a for x in file, and process it that way, which is my favorite way of doing it. Anything else there we want to talk about? No, but what I want to do, I should have made this an assignment actually, is And I'm going to create a new file to do this. Everybody got all this? I always forget to walk about. All three of y'all are good? Alrighty. All three of y'all. Alrighty. So I'm going to make a new one, November 16B. And I'm going to describe what I want it to do. Three quotes to open my comments. I want the program to display this. Enter a name or quit to stop. But actually what I want it to do is this. I want to offer a choice. 1, to enter data. 2, to process data. 0 to quit, or -1 to quit. That kind of thing. And then if they choose 1, I want it to say enter a name or quit to stop. They're going to type in Bob. And then we're going to say enter score number 1 or -1 to quit, or to end, you know. And then they're going to type in a 10. And I guess we could keep printing those messages out, you know, enter score number 2, enter score number 3, you know, and so they type in a 20 and then they give up, -1 to end. Then repeat the process, enter a name or quit to stop. And they type in and. Same business, enter score number 1 or -1 to end. Ann made 100 on the first one, but that's the only test she took, so when it says enter score -2 or -1 to end, they type in a -1. Then one more time it says enter a name or quit to stop. They type in quit. And they're done. At that point, it offers this menu again. 1 to enter data, 2 to process data, or -1 to quit. Right? They choose -1. It's done. They didn't choose to process the data. So what is this actually doing in this case? What I want it to do is at the point where they enter a -1 to stop entering scores, right? Like here, that's Bob's scores. I want it to save to file, or append to a file. Append to a scores.txt file the name and the list of scores. So here's what will be written out at that point. Bob, comma, 10, comma, 20. That's what the file will contain. Now this obviously is not, you know, part of the output that they're going to see. This is our own notes. Then after we go along and we enter Ann and we give her 100 and -1, we're going to append to the file the name and the list of scores, and it's going to write out Ann and 100, like that. So when we look at the file, it should have 2 lines of data. That's what we want to see. We want to see Bob with his 10 and his 20, and we want to see Ann with her 100. And then we could calculate the average, or we could do whatever we wanted to do in our processing. I don't think we're going to do that today. But let's do the first part. How are we going to design that? I'm going to end my multi-line comment with the triple quotes if you were typing these comments in. If you weren't, that's fine, because I typed an awful lot. So I think we're going to need a great big loop. And then we're probably going to need another loop and another loop. And why do I say that? Because the outer loop is going to say something like 1 to enter data, 2 to process, -1 to quit. You know, we could even just put that in as a print statement right dang now, because we know eventually that we're going to want to do that. But that's the outer loop, right? And then if they enter -1, we're going to break out of that outer loop. If they choose a 1, then we're going to go into an inner loop, which is going to say, this is an inner loop. Enter, enter name or quit to exit. And then inside that one, we're going to have an even more inner loop, which we will indicate with tabs, of course, which is print inner score or -1 to stop. So we're going to have 3 levels of indentation. By about the time you have 3 levels of indentation, you ought to think to yourself, is there a better way to structure it? Can I write some functions to do it? And yeah, we could. We could put all of the code for this inner loop in a function that asks for data and returns a list of data so that we can later on do something with it. And then our inner loop here could call that one. I think that would be a good idea. So let's do this part of it first. This is the innermost loop. We're going to change it into, we're going to write it as a function called getScores that returns a list of numbers. That's what that one's going to do. Let's define a function that does that. Define getScores. And what did I want it to do? I wanted it to print out inner score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could use a range to do that, but we don't know the upper range. They may enter a zillion scores. So probably just a for loop, but we're going to need a counter. It's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then why not a while true? We're going to ask them to enter the score. S is equal to input, enter a score, or -1 to stop. Let's convert it to an int. And yeah, we ought to do some error handling on that. I've forgotten something though. We'll fix that in a minute. Value is equal to the float version. Sorry, I'm spacing out and going into Java there. The float version of S. And if the value is equal to -1, then we break. But if we don't break, then we want to add it to our list of scores. Scores.append that value. Now we've got a problem here. And the problem is that. What is wrong with that line? Why is that line going to give us a syntax error if it compiles at all? How can you append to something if it doesn't exist in the first place? So we have to create our empty list first. Scores is equal to an empty list. I'm going to put a little comment that says end of while, and then we're going to return that scores list. Now it's possible that if they type -1 right away, there's not going to be any scores at all. It's going to be an empty list. Maybe we don't even print out a record in that case, right? I don't know. I think I'm just going to ignore that possibility for now and keep going. But we've typed some code. Let's test it out. This is just test code. But let's call getScores, stored in a variable, and then we can print that variable out and just make sure it works. We're just testing it. So test is equal to getScores. And then let's print our test data out. Right, we're just testing it. It's not a bad idea to see if you can get a test going after every method that you write. And sure, at the end you could comment out the tests or something like that. Run my module, enter a score or 1 to stop. Somebody made 100, they made a 90, they made an 80, and that's it. And our our list is in fact called 100. I mean, it has elements 190 and 80 in it. So that one is working. I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm gonna delete those for now. Now what's next? We've taken care of this innermost loop. I think I'm just going to cut that and put it as a comment for our getScores function. So where it says innermost loop, a function called getScores. So getScores function returns a list of numbers that the user inputs. Right, that's good enough. So we have handled that. Let's do that one. What is that one going to do? Nah, I don't want to break that one into its own function, although that wouldn't be a bad idea. So I'm going to carry these comments down underneath that getScores function so I can continue to look at them as I work. Everybody got that to work, that getScores? Okay. So the outer loop, print 1 to enter data, 2 to process. So that's just going to be a while true. While true, colon. I'm just going to copy that. Well, I'll type it in again because some of y'all may not have typed it. 1 to enter, scores, 2 to process, -1 to quit.
Just quit to quit.
Yeah, let's just do or quit in caps. But we didn't make the other one quit in caps. Yeah, we did. No, we made it -1 to stop. Yeah, I like quit. Okay. Or quit to stop, or quit to quit. I like that. Okay. That's too long of a line of text, so I'm going to break it up into 2 lines. All right, let's get our choice. Choice is equal to input. Let's convert it to uppercase. Choice is equal to choice. Nah, we don't need to convert it to uppercase, but we can do this. If choice dot upper is equal to quit, then break. Now we're ready for our innermost loop. Well, it's not really our innermost because that's in a function, but our inner loop. We're going to print inner name or quit to exit, quit to quit, stop to stop, I don't know. So another loop, a nested loop, while true. Let's get their name. Name is equal to input, inner name, or stop. If name dot upper is equal to stop, then break. Otherwise, we want to call the scores. Let's get the scores list. Scores is equal to getScores. This would be a good point to open the file, append to it, and close it. Open the file for append, write our data out to it, close the file. We didn't create a file name variable, so I'm just going to call it scores.txt here, which is tacky. Out file is equal to open scores.txt, comma A, and we probably already have another file in the same directory called scores.txt. But okay, we'll live with it. Now let's write to it our current data, outfile.write, the name, outfile.write the scores, outfile.close. Now I made a mistake. All of this should have been inside of an if statement, right? If choice is equal to 1, input. But this is the end while for there. We're going to have one more end while for there. But we need to highlight, we need to tab over everything from end while all the way up to here, right? To the beginning of our while loop, right? Because we need to have an if 1 to enter scores. If choice equals 1, do all this stuff. So I highlighted our entire inner while loop. I tab it over 1. See what I did there? Then in front of it, I'm going to do if, or I could even do elif. Elif choice. I never converted it to an int, so I'm just going to treat it like a string. And then lastly, let's at least put a little stub of a program here. Something's looking wrong to me. Yeah, it needs to be there. So, tabbed over 1 level, else elif choice is equal to 2, excuse me, quotes around it, 2. Then let's just print a message not implemented yet. Alrighty, that has half a chance of working. If I was going to turn something else into a function, if I wanted to extract it to make the main code shorter, to encapsulate it, what would be a good thing to put into a function? Alright, I kind of made that question easy to answer. This stuff. All of this stuff could be put into a function. I think let's just leave that alone though. I'm going to run it. 1 to enter scores, enter a name or stop. I forgot to use that counter and I forgot to increment that counter. But anyways, Bob earned a 10, a 20, a -1. And it blew up. The argument must be a string, not a list. Well, that's disappointing. Un momento while I look that up. Alright, so our problem here is I can't just write out the scores as a list. I can write out the name, but I can't write out the scores. And what I want it to be is like either a tab delimited list or a comma delimited list. I'm thinking tabs would be cool so that we could, well, commas would work too, so that we can open the file up in Excel and look at it. So since our don't type this. Since the data format that I want is going to look like this, Bob earned a 10 and a 20, like that, I'm going to print out a comma after that name, outfile.write, comma, like that. Then I need to run through our scores list, printing out each item. And as a matter of, okay, I'm going to wind up moving that line inside my for loop. So instead I'm going to write this above it. Right after the right name, for score in scores, outfile dot, no, tab this one over, the outfile.write comma. That's the first thing I want in it. and then outFile dot write the string version of that score. Now I can get rid of this line right there. And there are other ways of turning a list into a string delimited by commas, but I think that'll work. I think that's good enough. We should ask the user for the file name rather than hard-coded, of course. 1 to enter scores. Bob earned a 10, a 20, a 30. I'll bring the code back in just a second. A -1. It'd be nice if we added a message saying data saved to file. And then Ann earned 100 and then stopped. And then we're going to stop our data entry. We have no more names. I'm going to type quit. The program is done. Next I want to go and open and see if I can find that file. We should have a scores.txt file in the same directory. And since we're opening it for appending, who knows what was in there originally? Scores.txt. There's our file. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of garbage in it, right? If I deleted that, what could I do to make this output better? Something looks really dumb in it.
No new lines.
I would like a new line there, precisely. So, the last thing I do before I close the file after appending to it is to print out a /n. So right there above outFile.close, let's outFile.write a \n.
Shouldn't you put the new line in the for loop?
Yeah, that needs to be in the for loop. All right. So those 3 lines need to be indented inside the for loop. And they could have been collapsed into a single write, which I kind of feel like doing. I kind of also like it broken up like that, but I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to write out the comma, end quote, plus str score, end parentheses, plus \n, and there. Now it's all done in one loop. Excuse me, all in one line of code. No, I don't want it in the loop. I want the end of the line to be after we've written out the list of scores, not 1 per score. So, that plus \n goes bye-bye, and then I move it back to its original spot here. OutFile.write, quote, \n. And if you wanted to, you could replace those commas with a tab. It's called a tab delimited file. Why would you want to do that? Because what if somebody has a comma in their name? You know, John Q. Public, comma 3, you know, because he's the 3rd or something like that. Nobody's going to have a tab in their name. Let's change our file name, or let's ask the user for the file name. Has everybody got all the code that's on this page, or do you need me to stop? All right, let's stop. All right, I'm going to scroll through it again. This is the very beginning of our program. Get scores. Pause it, type it in if you don't already have it. Here's the next part. Our outer loop with our inner loop. Then the end of our program. Once we're done with this, we should have a comma delimited file that we can open in Excel, or we could open it for reading. I want to change the name of the file though. to something else, just so that I know that I have an empty file to play with. I mean, a fresh file. So I'm going to call it scores space November 16, whatever you want to call it. Then let's run. Why would I not want to put a W there? Because it would erase the file every time we wrote a line of data. We want all of our data saved, not just one line worth. So 1 enter scores Bob. I keep forgetting to add the counter. Forget it. 100, 90, 80, -1. And 80, 85, 100, 100. Come on. -1. Stop. Processing doesn't do anything. It says not implemented yet. Quit to stop. Okay. So now we have a file. If you have Excel installed on your machine, let's go look at it. So I'm going to launch Excel. I just went to my Start menu. Excel. Launch it. So we want to open a file. So I choose Open. I want to open something from this PC. It's in my scripting directory. It's not listed, but that's because Excel is only displaying honest to goodness Excel files, .xl and stuff like that. So type in, well, first from the little pull down, choose I want text files. And then we should see all of our text files. Pick the one you want. And then it comes up with this little text import wizard. It recognizes that it's a text file, it's got data in it. We could tell it where to start importing. Well, we want the whole thing, so we're going to start our import at line 1. It is a delimited file, meaning that all the pieces are separated by commas. Another kind of file is fixed width, you know, where the name has 20 spaces and then each score after that has 5 or something like that. Then we get to pick how the data is split up. In this case, they're split by commas. And notice that when I click that comma thing, it shows where the file is going to be divided up, like that, right? We don't have any separations by tabs, so I'm going to unclick that, but honestly, that doesn't change anything because we didn't have any tabs in there to begin with. Then I click Next, and we get to pick what kind of data type is in each field. The first one is never a number, unless somebody has a, you know, their name is 7 of 9. Text. So the first field is text, but the rest of them we're going to leave in so-called general, which just means that we let Excel convert it to a number if it looks like a number. Then we click Finish, and there's our score. We could write a report, we could draw graphs or whatever. That's kind of it, showing you the utility of creating a text file. There are other files that Python creates. You could write out a binary file, but if you wrote out a binary file, Excel wouldn't be able to open it and you wouldn't be able to process it like this. You know, text files are kind of like a common language that you can write programs, you know. That's really popular in Linux, in Unix, is to write one program that outputs a text file and then write another program that reads a text file so that you can keep chaining programs together to do a lot of processing like that. Alrighty. We have just a little bit more time. Let's go ahead and write something that will process that file. Tack something on to this not implemented yet that opens the file in one of the ways that we did at the beginning of the lecture. I don't care which way you do it. Just do it in one of those ways and then print the contents out. Doesn't have to do averages or anything fancy like that. Just add some code here that'll open the file and print it out via one of those 4 means that we discussed earlier. Alright, I'm actually going to leave that for y'all to do at home if you're not here. Whatever. because we have hit the end of our lecture. I know some people got it done, some people didn't. It's okay, either way. All right, let's make a Dropbox for it.